Caullin Lacy announced on Tuesday that he would be returning to the Louisville Cardinals next season.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my fifth year covering the university, third year hosting this show, and I want to take the time to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode of the show brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Joining me on this fine Tuesday edition of the show is on-air talent from the Pink Seats podcast, Keith Arutoff. You know Keith. At least if you're a everydayer of this show, then you know Keith. Keith, welcome back in, sir. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Just, getting over this little snap chill that sort of came into the area, but and trying to fasten in for the next couple of weeks of portal season and playoffs. And it's going to be, you're not going to be short on content.
No, I'm actually I'm trying to mentally plan it out because things are popping off right now. The regular season is over. The portal doesn't really open to underclassmen until next Monday, the 9th, but things are already just completely going haywire. Caullin Lacy announcing that he will be back. That is huge news for the Louisville offense. We'll discuss how it didn't look like that might be the case just a couple months ago. Will Louisville go after a portal quarterback? It seems like they will, but we'll discuss here shortly a possible name that has already been floated out there. Keith and I have pretty distinctly different viewpoints on this quarterback, or do we? And then to conclude the show, we'll talk about some internal candidates. Could Pierce Clarkson, Brady Allen, or Deuce Adams, or potentially Mason Mims contend for QB1 next season for the Cardinals? But the large news on Tuesday, it was announced about early afternoon that wide receiver Caullin Lacy would be returning. Now, he actually ended up redshirting this season after starting out the year with a broken collarbone, played a couple games, made it pretty clear that he wasn't all the way healthy, opted to bank on a full bill of health next season. A lot of people, myself included, didn't know that that would be at Louisville next season, but Keith, he made it evident on Tuesday that he would be back. How important is this for not only Louisville, but for him as well?
Yeah, it almost feels like a portal addition to me, because I was of the camp when he stepped out for the remainder of the season. I thought he was gone. I thought he was at least going to test his market value, but this is huge. You combine that with, I believe Chris Bell has another year of eligibility left. Chris Hughes has looked good as a walk-on, depending on how the portal goes. He likely gets a scholarship next year. Kateris Hicks coming in. We're looking pretty good at receiving core right now. Maybe would like to get one more wide receiver, one target to put at either the X or the Z. But no, it was huge. And whomever our starting quarterback is for next season, he's going to have plenty of toys to play with.
I think that one aspect of the passing game that Louisville just didn't have was the slot presence. And I mean, I will say that it's really hard to look at the body of work from Lacy this year because he missed 6 weeks heading into the year, had the broken collarbone, admitted that, he wasn't playing fully healthy, and it was pretty obvious that he wasn't. So I think one thing for Louisville fans is that you can't really put too much stock into what you saw, because Ja'Cory Brooks didn't even really look all that great last year for Alabama when he was dealing with injuries. So you have to understand how much that injuries can actually, alter a guy's playing style. But with Chris Bell, I think that the sky is the limit for this guy. I think he's going to continually get better and better. And then with Caullin Lacy adding that element to the slot that you've needed, I don't want to go as far as saying Tutu-esque, but they have needed over the past couple of years somebody that can take the top off the defense and a player that when he catches the ball, you think that every time he can take it to the house.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think Caullin Lacy is going to be that top off the defense guy, but he's definitely going to be the type of guy who causes safeties to play a little bit closer to the line to make them more susceptible to those deep balls. I know there was the hot rumor floating at the early aughts of last weekend that a certain speedster a little bit east on Highway 64 might be looking.
Bring him in.
That is someone who I think could really thrive in a Louisville offense just because of the weapons we have available and where he would slot in. We also got a couple of recruits coming in that I think have the speed to make an impact as well. But I'm curious to see what we will do. And really, it's tough to speculate until the cards are shuffled.
One thing that I thought to myself when I'm kind of putting the pros and cons in my head of why, Lacy would stay or would he leave. And this was the conversation I was having internally back in October. But I was thinking to myself, I think a lot of it will depend on who Louisville will bring in at quarterback. So him making this move combined with Jeff Brohm over the past 2 portal windows wanting to go get his quarterback early on so he can build the offense. Am I so far off with thinking that it might be, kind of determined behind the scenes who Louisville has sort of circled as their go-to guy?
It wouldn't shock me if this staff had players in mind, or, agents reach out and do things all the time. So I don't know what's considered tampering and what's not, but Louisville likely has a finger on the pulse of what guys are going to be in the portal. There's a couple of guys who are on playoff teams, so I don't quite know if they're going to jump in the portal yet. We will see how that shakes out, but there are a few guys that could be phenomenal scheme fits for Louisville whose names haven't quite popped in. And in the discussions to bring Lacy back, I'm sure that was part of the conversation. And then on the Lacy camp, it's like, okay, they brought in Tyler Shuck, and this dude might have just played himself from being, I'm a joke 7th-year quarterback to being a day 3 NFL draft pick. So he can bring in dudes who can get you the ball.
One thing that I kind of found fascinating when having a discussion with some fans earlier today on Tuesday was that I don't think that, with Lacy coming back and with Chris Bell, let's face it, I think that there is legitimate NFL draft interest with him. So I'm not sure I don't think it's confirmed that he's back yet. I think that we hope that he's back. We just don't know in today's day and age. But I think he is going to personally. I don't think it's about replacing Ja'Cory Brooks, because I think Chris Bell is going to ultimately sort of fit into that role and have Caullin Lacy at the slot. I think that you can add a wide receiver 1-esque player, but I could see Jeff Brohm going with a potential wide receiver in the portal that might be pretty talented coming out of high school. Maybe hasn't had the opportunities to shine yet, but has that level of skill set. And don't forget, you also have to replace Jaden Thompson and Jimmy Callaway, who have entered the portal. What type of a profile of receiver do you feel like Brom's going to go after here in the portal? Is it one of those that you're trying to find a direct replacement for Ja'Cory Brooks, or what are you kind of looking at?
So I think they'll probably take a big swing on at least 1 or 2 higher profile guys. And I'm not talking about like the Isaiah Bond type guys who were in the portal last year, but like that second tier, like ranked 10th to 25th overall wide receiver, like a Ja'Cory Brooks player. You probably take a swing at like 1, maybe 2 if you're feeling greedy of those guys. But yeah, I'm with you on that. I could see the wide receiver recruiting strategy being very similar to how we attacked the offensive line position last year in the portal, where, hey, you want to come in, try to compete for reps, earn a spot on the team? Sure. You can compete in spring ball. If you don't like it, we'll see. You can leave in the spring portal window. So I wouldn't be shocked if we just bring in 4 or 5 wide receivers, probably 3 or 4 of them with 1 year of eligibility left, just to try and fill up the rest of the depth chart. And I assume there's also some conversations going on behind closed doors like, hey, yeah, you're getting a little bit of draft buzz, but here's what we can do to keep you to stay. Similar to like what we did with Quincy Riley and Ashton Gelati.
Yeah. I'm really intrigued as to what was going to do and how they navigate this receiver recruiting, because it's clear that you're going to have to replace some guys, right? You're going to have to replace the two transfers, Thompson and Callaway. Those are just the two that we know about on Tuesday. By the time this episode releases later tonight, hell, there could be more. You just never know with how wild things are. But the main position that people are focusing on by default is the quarterback spot. It has sparked some discussion amongst the fan base. It has been a discussion that has gone on over the past probably 24 months since Jeff Brohm came to the University of Louisville. Is Louisville going to go after another portal QB to be QB1, or will there be an internal candidate step up? We'll discuss the portal side of things when we come back on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Card Nation, I went to the Chargers-Falcons game last Sunday. Bolt up, big Chargers fan. Probably not the greatest thing to admit, but look, it is what it is. We're having fun. The vibes are good with Jim Harbaugh. But I didn't have tickets leading up to about an hour and a half of that game. I went to Game Time and went to my app, and it made things so seamlessly easy. Got a panoramic view of the seat that I was looking at. Had the all-in pricing feature toggled on, which removed the surprise fees at checkout, and much, much more. So do yourself a favor. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. And heading into this second segment of this Tuesday edition of the show with on-air talent / producer / whatever you want to call him from the Pink Seats podcast, Keith Arutoff. Keith is a great follow on Twitter as well at producer_Keith. Look, he was in the Diego Pavia discussion before Diego Pavia became a national sensation. So a lot of merit to what Keith says. Keith, after Jack Plummer comes in and has a really good year, Tyler Shuck has a career year, both of those in back-to-back seasons. It looks like Louisville's going to go with another portal quarterback. I feel like that success over the past 2 years, obviously NIL in mind, Louisville has to be a spot that if you're a pretty good quarterback transfer, you have to be at least giving Jeff Brohm's program a peek.
Well, there's a reason that every single article that's been put out on just about any high-profile transfer quarterback, Louisville's one of the programs that's always listed. It's like, we know we don't have a ton of depth. We've got youth, and then we have, I believe, Harrison Bailey, because eligibility is just a social construct at this point. Harrison Bailey somehow, I believe, still has a year of eligibility left, but we don't have a true bona fide starter, game day ready quarterback. So Keaton Slovis has been rumored to be, like, Louisville's interested in Slovis. You've got Miller Moss. You've got Wazoo's quarterback.
Keaton Slovis?
Yeah.
That guy's been in college for how long?
Yeah. Well, I personally think he's going to follow Jamie Chadwell wherever he goes, but our logo's up on the graphic.
Oh, man, it's that time of year already, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Man, I feel like everyone wants there to be an internal candidate that arises for this team, and something that we'll discuss here in just a second. I think what has to be known is that this coaching staff sees these guys practice every day. They know the quarterbacks they are, and if they're going after a portal quarterback, then that should indicate their beliefs on that room, as a whole. But again, at the very least, competition, because you're losing Tyler Shuck. I mean, now you're bringing in Mason Mims, but you still want to have depth. But let's talk about one of the top potential options, it seems already. Now, there will possibly be other options to arise, but USC transfer Miller Moss, yes, that Miller Moss that cut Louisville's defense up into a million pieces in the 2023 bowl game, has been rumored to be a potential option for Louisville and vice versa. Keith, I know that you have some skepticism over bringing Miller Moss in. What kind of stems that? What is at the root of the problems for you?
So diving into a lot of the tape on Miller Moss, and I'll start with the positives. Like, he has really good prototype quarterback size, and he doesn't make devastatingly bad mistakes, which is something Louisville fans have had experience with, not necessarily this year, but the year before. The areas of concern for me is arm strength, doesn't quite have a rocket arm, and you can see that in throws where it'll look like he's throwing into an incredibly tight window. And one of my favorite highlights that talks about this is, I believe it was like a 30-yard touchdown pass against Michigan. He has a guy completely beat on a go route up the right side of the field. The safety gets caught sort of playing like a robber-esque role when he's supposed to be in cover 2. And it's a clean pocket. Moss is able to step up and looks like he's throwing full go, full bore. And it's just a lollipop. Like there's no zip on the arm, and that allows the safety to almost get back into the play. Now, at the end of the day, they don't ask how, they ask how many, and it was a touchdown. So, but the arm talent, like he doesn't have the ability to throw from different arm angles like Tyler Shuck does. He doesn't have the arm strength that Tyler Shuck does. He doesn't even have the mobility that Tyler Shuck did. And Tyler Shuck wasn't exactly that mobile. He is if you're in the 1990s, early 2000s, the prototype NFL quarterback for that era. Just big, tall dude who can throw with some touch. Now, is he a good college quarterback? Yes, I think it'd be a fine addition. My concern comes with he's the first guy on the market, and he's already in conversations with Michigan and Auburn. I don't want to pay a premium price for a player that's not of premium value. I would rather take my chances on a lower to mid-tier guy who has that arm talent, maybe coming up from American Athletic or a CUSA school, than overpay and not be able to address other areas of need on the roster.
I don't disagree there. And that's sort of where things get fluid, right? Is that the market dictates everything. And when you go with the portal heavy model, you are victim to that market. And one thing that I will say is that sometimes it sounds great to go get these quarterbacks, but at the end of the day, you don't really have all the say in who enters and who doesn't. So I do think that Miller Moss is going to be better than some of the options that are out there. Honestly, I think he's going to be one of the best quarterback portal options out there anyway, just because I just don't see a ton of quarterback movement. I think you're going to have these like elite transfers that already know where they're going, and it's going to be to a blue blood program. I think that Louisville's bread and butter is going to be to go to that portal level right under that. I do think that you're on point with Moss's arm strength. The one thing that impresses me about him, I think that he has really good pocket presence. I do like his ability to move around in the pocket, plays like a veteran, has made some clutch drives in his career, has good intermediate accuracy. I like how he's able to hit guys on the run, has that, drop in the bucket type potential as a quarterback. And what he doesn't have in that, prototypical size for a Brohm quarterback, or the arm talent, or what you may say, I do think that he makes up with that touch, with that presence. I think that he is a nice and quick trigger as well. So I think that if you want to, I bring up SMU as a possible, comparison. If you want to go with a guy who can make those quick throws, I do think that, getting the ball to Caullin Lacy, Miller Moss sort of fits that bill. But with every quarterback in the portal, there are going to be some flaws. Now, I think that the bottom line is, does Jeff Brohm believe that, the benefits outweigh the drawbacks? And Plummer was sort of iffy, Tyler Shuck was a complete boom. Credit to Jeff Brohm for making that move. But I have to ask, though, with Miller Moss only being 6'1", are we sort of like, because Plummer and Shuck were over 6'4", are we blowing this height narrative out of proportion, or is there like a legitimate, this is what Brom's looking for?
So I don't necessarily think 6'1" is too short to be a Division I quarterback, especially at a program like ours where we don't recruit, holy crap, huge offensive linemen. So I think he'd be able to see downfield just fine. And size-wise, I would prefer Moss's build to Plummer's, just because Moss, I don't know what he's listed at, but he has weight to him.
Is what he was listed at.
Yeah, I'm looking at him. I'm assuming that's probably closer to 225, 230.
Yeah. Can we also talk about how, not to cut you off, but on a timing standpoint, I want to kind of get this in before we move on to the internal candidates. I hate this whole narrative. Well, he was benched at USC. You really need to dive into why that was. It felt like he was an unnecessary scapegoat for an offense that wasn't really his fault in terms of some bad offensive line play and a head coach that might not necessarily be having the fastball that he had a couple of years ago. And the offense still was better with Moss on the field than it was with the new quarterback. So I do feel like that's still an interesting thing to point out, is that you're not getting like this guy that got benched because he wasn't good enough to play there.
Yeah, he wasn't terrible. And yeah, I think there was a little bit of face saving put in place for Lincoln Riley for the move, and also just wanting to test out some of the youth on the roster. So, like, once your season is shot to a certain point, you need to turn to some youth, or maybe you made some evaluations and certain positions aren't quite as good. Like another potential option that I hope we get to discuss once he hits the portal. Hey, the team's O-line isn't that good, so we need to have the more mobile quarterback option, even if his arm isn't as good. So there are a lot of different reasons why players get benched. That's the lazy argument against Miller Moss, in my personal opinion. I think there are plenty of other aspects of his game you want to critique, but you actually just have to get into the film room and actually watch the kid. So again, you can do a hell of a lot worse than Miller Moss as your starting quarterback. So if that's where Louisville ends up going, that's not the end of the world. I just
You're
don't
gonna have to
feel
play to the strings.
Yeah, and I don't feel comfortable paying a king's ransom for a player that you win with rather than winning because of, if that makes sense.
No, that I think that's a very good point. And like I said, that you're sort of at the mercy of the market, whether or not it's like, hey, are we comfortable paying this? But if we're not, do we feel like there's a good enough option that we can pivot to that still makes sense? And it felt like, the whole Cam Ward dilemma last year that Louisville was involved with. They didn't really like the price that he was requesting. So they're like, okay, well, we have Tyler Shuck that we feel can be good enough. Where will Louisville go? But it's pretty clear to me that Louisville is going to go after a portal quarterback. And there is a portion of this fan base that just does not understand why that is. And we'll break it down a little bit more when we come back on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Cardinal fans, we've been having such a great time keeping it locked on right here at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the place where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And into the final segment of this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast with, from the Pink Seats, Keith Arutoff. Keith, there's been some discussion about whether or not Louisville is going to fill the QB1 role internally, whether they're going to go to the portal for the third straight year. And just that Louisville is being listed with some of these guys shows me the latter, that they are going to go with the portal. But there's a portion of this fan base that is still holding out hope that either Brady Allen, honestly, Pierce Clarkson, or someone else can rise to the occasion and be QB1 next season. It just doesn't seem like that is likely at this point.
Yeah, I honestly, if we were going to go internal for a quarterback next year, at least from the way it's shaken out on the depth chart, it looks like it'd be Harrison Bailey at this point. And honestly, I mean, he can hand the ball off to Isaac Brown and Duke Watson as good as anyone. So maybe that's not the worst option. But this is a coaching staff that has really committed to the moniker of trying to win and trying to win now. And when you are, for lack of a better term, a portal reliant team, the pressure is on you to win every year. I mean, the schedule Louisville faces in 2025, there are a lot of opportunities to get some wins. It's a bit of a challenging ACC slate where you only play Clemson and Miami as the two like marquee teams, but a lot of those really good middle to upper tier ACC teams, and then a really weak non-conference schedule. Thanks again, Indiana. So the pressure is going to be on to win next season. And like you said earlier in the show, the staff is seeing the players practice and watching how they go through on every day. And I don't think that they're just portal hunting for the sake of portal hunting. If they thought they could win with a guy on the roster, they would. I know that the staff has raved about Mason Mims coming in as a true freshman, but this staff also, I mean, we had to drag him kicking and screaming basically to give Isaac Brown carries this year, that they're hesitant to trust freshmen. So you have a lot of youth and you have a lot of guys who haven't started. So get a portal guy, someone who's a veteran who maybe has completed all their regular coursework, so their job can just be quarterback, or that's what their major can be their senior year. like Tyler Shuck.
NCAA road to glory. You complete all your coursework and you can just work on your skill points and your your leadership in your final season. I think at the very least this is something that you're trying to, even if you feel like you do have an internal option that can compete for the job, you bring in a portal quarterback as insurance. You look at Michigan paying $12 million over 4 years for Bryce Underwood, the number one quarterback, and they're rumored to go get a portal guy because you need to win now. And I think that Jeff Brohm understands that you do need to win now, but we mentioned it. This is a coaching staff that look, everyone in the city of Louisville wants to see Pierce Clarkson be the guy. There's just a chance that he's not. And it sucks to say that. It was the same way with Juwan Pass. Everyone wanted Puma to be the guy. Ultimately, he just ended up not being the guy. And unfortunately, that happens. And I'm not saying that is 100% going to be the case, but who's to say that even if Louisville's looking to go get a portal quarterback, hell, Brady Allen or Pierce Clarkson might end up transferring before they get a chance to compete. And you can't blame them if they do. So you just never know. It just feels like I go back to this notion that the coaches, not the fans, the coaches are the ones that see these players every single day. And if they look at this roster, Jeff Brohm, as much of a quarterback guru as he is, looks at this room and says, you know what, we need to go to the portal. I feel like that tells you everything you need to know.
I agree with you wholeheartedly there. Now, the conversation can be had about why don't we have anyone on the roster who this coaching staff believes in? We're getting ready to go into year 3. So that critique is something that can really start to be amplified, I would say probably next offseason moving forward, having 3 potential recruiting classes to bring in and 2 full cycles. So it's an interesting situation, but I'm curious to see how Pierce, Deuce, Brady, Harrison, those guys develop. I know they like Mason Mims coming in. Maybe he's a freshman phenom who lights the world on fire.
Wouldn't it be nice? We're due for one again. We're
right?
I do think Deuce Adams could be I am a huge fan of Deuce Adams. The one thing about Deuce that I want to see just continue to improve is that internal clock. If he can work through some of those reads better, because it's clear that when you watch the tape, I mean, you're talking about a guy who succeeded really well in Texas, can make almost every throw on the field. It's just a matter of, hey, can you speed up your thinking and process what you're seeing, process the different stunts and the different coverages, and being able to make the right play at the right time. And if he can do that now, unfortunately, he was a late summer, or he was a summer addition and not a spring guy. So this was his first year. So I think that personally for me, I'm looking at Deuce Adams in this quarterback battle in the spring, because with another year of college ball under his belt, I personally for me, and I keep saying that term personally for me because this doesn't represent what everyone thinks, Keith, I think that Deuce Adams is the guy of the future. It's just, are you going to give him the keys this year or next year? And it looks like next year might be the way to go.
Yeah, Deuce Adams is another kid who I'm really high on, because you talk about the tools that Tyler Shuck had when he was a portal prospect, and it's if he can just stay healthy. Deuce Adams has a lot in common with him. He can make those sidearm, awkward angle throws. He has a rocket arm to push the ball downfield. He's more mobile than Shuck because he hasn't had injuries. He's quick guy, big, statuesque dude. I'm in the same boat as you that I think Deuce Adams, I about said Duke Watson, Deuce Adams could potentially be the guy for the future at the quarterback position, but you got to let the kid cook a little bit. I mean, he was just a true freshman, so he'll be a redshirt freshman next year. Like, that's having to put a lot of faith in someone that young, and their talent has to really shine to justify that, as we've seen with this coaching staff at the running back position.
Here's the beauty of it all. If you get to summer and Deuce Adams wins the job, fantastic. Just because you bring this whole misconception, I know that it looks like this, like you're going to the portal to, in theory, get you a QB1. But there is a world and a reality that QB1 that you brought in might get beat out.
Yep, exactly.
In the fall camp. And if that happens, well, then no one's the wiser. What you're doing by bringing in a portal quarterback, at the very worst, is you're giving yourself depth, because what I don't want is Louisville has one quarterback, and if he goes down, you're done. That's the worst thing that can happen. And unfortunately, we're seeing it in all sports. Guys get injured. You have to deal with it. You have to have meaningful depth, but we'll see how that looks depending on who they get. But, guys, it's going to be a really wild month. Keith said it. Things are going to change and then change again. I'm going to try to keep up with the madness on this show. I promise. I can't make the promise that I'm going to get it all right all the time, because things change like the wind, but we're going to try to keep the pulse in a clear spot as much as we can. That's going to wrap up this Tuesday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Go Cards.